In the mid-19th century, the United States was a nation divided, not just by ideologies, but by geography. The journey from the Atlantic to the Pacific was a months-long arduous ordeal. By land, you traveled across mountains, deserts, and plains in carriages. By sea, you would have to stay on for months on the open ocean. But in 1869, steel rails stitched the continent together, changing the country forever. This is the story of the Transcontinental Railroad in 5 minutes. The idea of a cross-country railroad wasn't new, but it gained momentum following the 1848 discovery of gold in California and the U.S. victory in the Mexican-American War. The West needed a faster, safer link to the rest of the country, not just for settlers, but for commerce, defense, and national unity. It's worth noting that other railroads existed in the East and West, but there was no transcontinental connection between them at that time. By the 1850s, the debate over the route had become entangled in politics. Would it follow a central path through the Great Plains into Wyoming and Utah, a southern route along the deserts into Texas, or even further north into the Nebraska Territory of the Pacific Northwest? But the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 broke the stalemate. With the southern states absent from Congress, the Republican-controlled government pushed forward with a central route to California through the Great Plains. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act, which chartered and authorized 2 companies to build from opposite directions. The Union Pacific would lay track westward from Omaha, Nebraska, while the Central Pacific Railroad would lay track heading eastward from Sacramento, California. The federal government offered significant incentives, including land grants, loans, and subsidies for each mile of track, ranging from $16,000 to $48,000, with the price varying on the terrain's difficulty. For investors, it was a golden opportunity as millions of dollars were at stake. For engineers and laborers, it was a monumental challenge. The Union Pacific's route began in the Great Plains in July 1865. Their crews, predominantly Irish immigrants, Civil War veterans, and freedmen, faced hostile weather and at times resistance from the indigenous tribes whose lands were being crossed without consent. That being said, the flat terrain allowed rapid progress, but the distance and supply shortages made the work grueling. The Central Pacific had the opposite problem. Though they started earlier in January 1863, their route immediately entered into the foothills and then the mountains of the Sierra Nevada Range in eastern California. Granite cliffs, deep snow, and steep grades made the work painfully slow. As a result, the CP recruited thousands of Chinese laborers who became the backbone of the workforce. Their precision blasting, tunnel boring, and sheer endurance turned near impossible mountain passes into real routes. While the Central Pacific crews slowly dug out of the cliffs, the Union Pacific laid track at a much faster rate across the Great Plains. All the triumphs came at a steep cost, though. Harsh weather, disease, dynamite accidents, and dangerous working conditions claimed many lives. Chinese laborers faced both brutal conditions and widespread discrimination, even as their contribution proved indispensable. Indigenous communities saw their lands encroached, bison herds slaughtered, and traditional ways of life disrupted forever. After years of competition and accusations of corruption on both sides, the 2 companies met at Promontory Summit, Utah, on May 10, 1869. A ceremonial golden spike was driven into the final tie, and telegraph wires carried the message across the country. 4 letters. Done. In that moment, the journey from coast to coast was reduced from months to about a week. The Transcontinental Railroad was no longer a dream. It was reality. The route transformed the nation. It allowed settlers, goods, and information to move at an unprecedented speed. Towns sprang up along the route. Industries flourished, and the economic integration between East and West accelerated. But progress came with consequences. Indigenous displacement intensified as settlers poured westward. Wildlife suffered, particularly the near extermination of the bison. The railroad monopolists grew immensely wealthy, often through questionable financial practices. Today, the Union Pacific owns the Transcontinental Railroad from Omaha to Sacramento, having merged with the Central Pacific successor, the Southern Pacific, in 1996. The route is a landmark achievement of 19th century America, symbolizing the ambition, ingenuity, and determination that shaped the nation's growth. Over 90% of the original Transcontinental Railroad is still in use today, and it continues to represent a nation's ability to envision the impossible and turn it into a reality. It was more than just a line on a map. It was a thread that connected the country, for better and worse, transforming America forever. However, it also reminds us that progress often comes with a cost borne by those whose stories are often ignored. Approximately 1,200 people died during the railroad's construction, mostly Chinese workers. From the Irish and Chinese workers who built it, to the native nations whose lands were taken, and the engineers who faced nature's challenges, the story of the Transcontinental Railroad is one of both unity and division, hope and loss.